And thank you, members, for being here on time. And also the quarry operators and representatives, thank you for coming to this public hearing. So the REDP committee meeting is hereby called to order. And I will introduce the members to the operators and representatives and the Secretary of Public Land and everyone who are here today. On my right is Senator Victor Orcutt, who is the Vice Chair of this committee. And then Senator Carl King Neighbors and Senator Edith Ilongguerrero. And on my left is Senator Vinny Sablan, and next to him is Senator Frank Cruz, and I am Mr. Kiruba, Chairman of this committee. By virtue of the introduction, the roll call is in order. So we have numbers to make this meeting quorum. As a matter of fact, all the members are here, and I'm very thankful for that. Proceeding to number 3 of our agenda. May I hear a motion to adopt today's agenda?
Motion to adopt today's agenda.
Second.
A motion has been made and adopted, seconded. So our agenda for today's meeting is hereby adopted. Now this committee meeting is open for the public. So I would like to call anybody in the public out in the chamber other than the quarry operators and the representatives. And if they wish to make any comments on today's agenda, please make yourself recognized so you can come to the chamber. And before you do that, please state your name for the record. This is for the public, not the quarry operators and representatives, and also not for the Secretary of PPL. It seems like there's no one in the public that would want to make comments, public comments on today's agenda. So now we will proceed down to old business. And on number 1, it's a Senate Bill 22-52 to provide for quarrying controls and reclamation plans in the Commonwealth and for other purposes. At this time, I would like to recognize the author of this legislation so he can briefly explain or provide a brief description of the legislation. Senator Ilongguerrero, Edith Ilongguerrero is the author of this legislation. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee, and good morning to everyone in the chamber, especially the quarry operators. I appreciate your presence this morning, and I'm glad we're here to have some conversation regarding the proposed Senate bill that I have introduced actually, and this is the reason why we're calling for this meeting this morning and having a public hearing. Primarily, it's always been my interest as a former labor secretary and working with MSHA, having traveled to West Virginia as well. And I've noticed that, I became very concerned about the properties within the Commonwealth regarding quarry operations and understanding too the need of the community for the extraction of these materials for construction projects, be it commercial buildings or home residentials. My biggest concern is that I wanted to have some sort of an assurance from the industry itself and also from the legislature, ourselves being the decision makers of our CNMI, that we do have a plan in place to have some sort of a decision and operational procedures and regulations to put back the land into some kind of value, not necessarily prior to the excavation process or extraction of materials, but how can we both work as a semi government and private operators to restore some kind of value back to the properties that are, for example, no longer going to be useful, meaning most of them are dormant. And even with the current operations, with the standing regulations, I did read the comments from DPL, not necessarily objecting to the intent of the bill, but I think this is the opportunity for all of us to sit down and work together on how best we can work as a community to figure out a way to put back some sort of value into the property of our Commonwealth quarry operations. Looking at a material called no longer just a hole in the ground, there's a lot of ideas of how we can have some sort of value back into the properties. And I'm glad that DPO is here too, because when we look at land valuation overall within the Commonwealth, I often wonder about what would be the current market value of those particular properties that are no longer quote unquote useful as we speak today. But I'm certain that in the future, as we speak from the current legislation moving forward, that we could restore some kind of value into the properties with respect to the quarry operations. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I really hope to hear from the operators themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Guerrero. And before I recognize the speakers for this morning, first I would like to introduce in front of me on the right is our Senate Legal Assistant, and on the left is our Senate Legal Counsel, Anthony Villagomez, and I forgot to mention the Legal Assistant's name, Jolene Kagawa. And the person that is operating the recording machine is our Sergeant at Arms, John Santos. First, I would ask the operators and public land to individually come forward as your name is called and present your comments to Senate Bill 22-52. And then I respectfully ask the members to please refrain any questions until all the presenters have made their presentations. So first, I would like to recognize the Secretary of DPL, Mr. Igsoma. Please state your name for the record.
Howdy, Tiro. Good morning, Honorable Chairman, Vice President, former Senator Coco, Vice Chairman, Witness, Morales, Reporter Samson, to the Honorable Senators. Good morning to you. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity to be here before you today to participate in this hearing, and at the same time to answer any questions you may have with respect to the Bill Senate Bill 22-52. And with respect to comments, for the record, we've already submitted our comments back in July 2nd, 2021, when we were requested by DPL. And my name is Sixto Kaiparigi-Somar, apologized. Sixto Kaiparigi-Somar, Permanent Secretary for the Department of Public Lands under the Executive, our Honorable Governor Ralph Torres, and the Governor. And so I will go ahead and just summarize my comment, Chairman, if it's okay, because I know you have it with you. But generally, with respect to the quarry, we really have no objection to the bill. As you know, the purpose of public land is to execute the policies that are created by this legislature. So DPO with respect to the quarry, we have regulations for the quarry, for TOA. And if I may, any quarry applicant, any person out there who would like to do some quarrying, they go through our real estate division and submit their application, and it's a TOA, which means it's a temporary occupancy agreement. And that agreement will hold the contract and agreement between DPL and the vendor or the person, the business entity that will be working in the quarry. With respect to any regulations in DPL, it's very limited. The regulations on quarry under DPL is limited. You can only find it under the 145-7210I, which is a description of what TOAs are under DPL. And so under letter I, it just states quarry, and it defines quarry, what it is, and also defines or states what the fees will be annually at $12,000 a year, with a 5% increase on that $12,000 subsequently, up to the maximum of 5 years. So that's about it. It's very short. And of course, upon entering public lands, when I got confirmed by this August body, I was informed by our real estate division and compliance division that they've been working on trying to get regulations together to enhance the quarry operations or quarry application review process. So under the DPO temporary occupancy agreement, number 2 of our comment to this body, we basically just itemized out what we do with TOAs, and this is extracted from our agreement. So the agreement between DPO and the quarry vendors is a little bit more detailed. And in here, it informs the quarry operators, or when we provide them with the permit, it informs them what they need to do, what kind of plans they need to submit with their application, and at the same time informs them to make sure they engage with CRM with respect to any other permit. The permit that DPO gives the quarry operators is only a permit for the quarry operator to operate and be able to enter public land to do a quarry business. Any other engagement on that land, whatever they need to do, would require a CRM clearance for whatever environmental assessments that they need to turn in before they initiate the quarry. And so at the same time, in that agreement, we do have a section in there whereby it addresses them to give us all this information with respect to the plans, what they're going to do with the quarry, what kind of extraction they're going to do, what are the safeties and the hazards, and they're itemized in our response to you under number 2. And once we receive these documents, we basically just make sure CRM has a copy of this. We inform CRM that these are the documents and for them to review. And if they have any concerns, if there's any red flags based on the submissions, for us to coordinate, CRM and DPO to coordinate to work with the operator of the quarry. So that's about it, senators, for our comments, and you can find a little bit more details on our July 2nd, 2021 letter. So just Masi Tiro.
So just Masi, Secretary, I may ask that you stay a little bit longer because we're going to have the Q&A later on.
Yes, sir.
And the next on our listing is the CMS. Anyone who is representing CMS, please appear self-recognize and come up to the chamber. And please state your name for the record. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning, Senator Kidua, honorable senators and committee members. My name is Sonia Danko, and I am a licensed civil engineer in the CNMI and Guam. I am currently practicing in my private business, SP Danko and Associates LLC.
Good morning, Senators. I am Joe Guzman from CMS, Construction Material Supply. Sonia Danko is our representative for any answers or questions pertaining to the bylaws that we have to go forward with.
If I may, I would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Senate Bill number 22-52. And thank you also for taking the initiative to making this, part of our future for the CNMI, something that we need to address and look into. Really appreciate it. I understand that we do have a lot to go to accomplish our goals and objectives. So thank you again for having us here to share our thoughts and opinions. I would like to begin by sharing my comments that after reading this bill, I'm very thankful that it's been introduced and to look at our environment as a very significant resource for our people and the CNMI. However, I would like to add some input, not only from a consultant representing CMS point of view, but also as a public citizen here in the CNMI. After reading the bill on the findings and purpose, it appears the legislature is seeking solutions for existing abandoned resource depleted quarries and to ensure that the Department of Public Lands include reclamation and post-depletion plans in the quarry leases. So my first question is, will this bill only apply to the Department of Public Lands, or will it apply to private lands as well? And I hope that we can provide some clarification. Secondly, I agree with proposing a bill that would have in place regulations regarding reclamation plans for both private and public quarries. I would like to also suggest that when developing the reclamation plan, that coordination between Department of Public Lands and Coastal Resource Management do collaborate. So what we normally encounter is either duplication or maybe, one regulation superseding the other. So it just to kind of improve the regulatory process for our operators and for the people that are involved in, like the DPL, private landowners, so that they know specifically what are their obligations as landowners and obligations as operators. The other thing I would like to mention is that with respect to CMS, for example, the DPL quarry, the lease will expire in 2023. And so some of the concerns that we have is how do we address reclamation planning when the operation is currently ongoing and it is not yet finally fulfilled its entire overall master plan. Yes. I agree that reclamation plans should address safety during operation as well as post-operation. Sorry, I'm trying my best here with such a limited time, but another thing that I would like to propose or suggest, whether there is one or is not yet in place, land use planning under the Department of Public Lands. To determine feasible locations and areas and the type of minerals that are to be extracted and what is the volume or quantity of materials that can be extracted from that area, and what does the government plan to do after the mineral has been depleted? I think that that's a very big item to address. It allows the operator to be able to plan accordingly to the government's plan for the future use of that quarry. I heard Senator Edith speak about, value. There is economic value in depleting the quarries when we extract minerals for product and sales of the manufactured product. But there is also value in the post-depleted quarries, and I would be more than happy to share some of those case studies that have been done in the U.S. and internationally. And I think that our people deserve, a thriving economy, and I think we should not, disregard that quarries or a hole in the wall can become a very thriving economic value for the CNMI. And I'll be here to answer any other questions, and we are planning to submit our comments in writing, hopefully by today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Danko. Mr. Guzman?
Sir, with all due respects, the write-up is, like Sonia said, there's quite a few things that are like misreading or leading. And one of them was like on section 101 of reclamation plan, that reclamation plan should be subject to revisions to confirm with the actual conditions, i.e. the Sablon quarry, the one that's going up to Sotapasi. At one time, that was an active quarry, and then was shut down due to reason it just can't pass the hardness of the rock. It just couldn't pass. It's the Mancusman niya. It is too soft, it won't pass. So of course it was shut down. So just like this in the reclamation plan, we do not know as we're going down to earth that is it still suitable. So we always send material testings every 6 months or 3 months, depending on that thing, just to show that materials are still, the density testing of the rocks are still there, that will pass. The other one is in section 103, the time period reclamation. Reclamation activity should not be started to propose hazard on an ongoing quarry operation. And excavation of lower areas could cause contamination and of the materials, i.e. if we start reclamation as we're starting and we're still quarrying and on top you plant plants or whatever, then you get contamination of the leaves, twigs or whatever, and then will cause failure to the cement, the dry rot. So again, we have to wait till the depletion of the quarry. We can't reclaim until upon depletion. That's where we're looking at this. We can't, we just gotta wait. Yes, we have to the year 2023, but then we're still subject to requests for renewals and then bid after. So there's still decades, more material still there. So at least I'm looking at maybe 2 decades more, 20 more years of quarry. So this plan, we can put it on the table, but then it has to be hold. Just gotta hold on to it. That's what I have to say on this.
To add on to Mr. Guzman's comments, since we've been working with Mr. Guzman, we have implemented benching strategies on the quarry, which I believe, is visible from the main road. You can tell that we've adopted a benching plan in our quarry operation. And what I believe Mr. Guzman is trying to say is that contamination of the products becomes an issue. So revegetating during operation is not an option. That way, materials are meeting the specifications of construction materials that are used in roadways, buildings, all infrastructure and development projects. Am I correct?
Thank you.
The committee appreciates if you can complete your comments in writing and please submit it to the committee so that we can, the main purpose of this hearing is to improve the legislation. So as much as possible, we would like your comments so that we can improve it. Since you are the operators and you are the ones who are seeing the situation out in the quarry. So the committee appreciates if you can turn in your written comments at a later on so that we can look at it and see how we can improve this legislation. And if possible, please, maybe by next week, this legislation probably will not be out on the floor for passage. We want to make sure that we receive all the comments from the operators so we can strengthen it and make it better. Thank you very much, sir. And next on our list is Hawaiian Rock, Mr. Dave Bush, please. State your name for the record.
Good morning, Senators, and I want to thank the committee for the opportunity to be here. We operate on private property, so this bill does not specifically concern us, but of course, the quarry restoration is something that we have thought of and talked about with the owners on our property. But part of it, I'd like to also say, a lot of times when we quarry and we have a face as we move down, it's very solid coral solid rock, and you won't get vegetation to grow on that. Now, some of the byproducts, accessory materials that stockpiled, that might be able to shape and be able to grow some material. But a lot of the quarry faces, if they're pretty vertical, you're not going to get any vegetation to grow on there. One of our questions is, will the Mining Safety Health Administration mine IDs be tied to whatever quarries are in use? And will the MSHA regulations be part of the leases as well under the legislation? That's primarily what we have. I saw things in there about fences and that sort of thing. I didn't see anything particular about signage, but especially where you have vertical phases, there needs to be some very permanent signage so that if someone's hiking through the area after it's restored, they're at least aware, even if they've reached the fence, that there could be a bad situation for someone at the face of the cliff. So, primarily that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. We appreciate if you can give us your comments in writing, especially that you are operating on public lands, your recommendations pertaining to the bill. So perhaps we can incorporate public lands in this legislation and your other recommendations also, so that we will make this legislation comprehensive. And before, I'm going to ask the committee that before we pass this legislation, that we will send it out, the draft, to all the operators representatives, including public land, CRM, for further comments on the bill. So we appreciate if you can send us in writing so you can help us improve this legislation.
Okay, thank you very much. We are adjacent to public lands. We don't, none of our property is part of public lands, but we're adjacent to public lands.
Thank you very much. And the next operator is Success International Corporation, Mr. Henry Miao, or representative. Okay, so no one is here, we'll move on. And then USA Fanter, Steve Kuyan, or representative. Please state your name.
Good morning, Chairman and Senators. My name is Steve Chen from USA Fund. Regarding the answer and question, I refer to my consultant, Tony Munoz.
Mr. Chairman, committee members. Mr. Chairman, committee members, thank you very much on behalf of Mr. Chen today he has a prepared statement that he'd like to have me read for the benefit of the committee. We thank you for the opportunity to comment on the subject bills, Senate Bill 2252. The quarry site in Canatabla, for which USA Fanter has been permitted, has been quarried for almost 50 years prior to USA Fanter commencing operations on April 9, 2013. In review of 2252, USA Fanter is in agreement with the provision, section 105, -1, page 5, lines 28 to 29, that the quarry areas that are disturbed on the effective date of this article are exempt from further reclamation requirements. In the same vein, we would like to recommend that the provision be expanded to read that quarry operations currently permitted are exempt from requirements of these provisions. Current and continued compliance with operational conditions for both quarry operations and reclamation will be as permitted and pursuant to the provisions of their agreements with DPL, of course permitted with the Coastal Resources Management, having obtained a CRM permit, inclusive of allowed extensions or renewal of permits and agreements for the same location for where they currently operate, shall remain in effect. There are no further comments, but just to explain USA Fanter's position, for the consideration of the committee, it inherited a property in as much as and had it permitted for what had already been an existing quarry for over 50 years. So with respect to the legislation and its intent, most likely very applicable to maybe new sites, but as opposed to one that has had already been quarried and USA Fanter permitted just to continue to do the same, that the understanding of how it should operate should be based on what the permit that it already acquired and the agreement for which it has with the Department of Public Lands. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Muya. If you have an extra copy on your written testimony, please give it to our Sergeant at Arms. And thank you very much. If we can stay around for a little bit more, just in case the members have questions for any particular comment.
Thank you.
And from the Mariana Grove LLC Tinian, operator or representative? Anybody? No one? So, those are the uh, JJ Salon Rock Quarry submitted his comments and asked if he can be excused this morning. So now I would like to ask our members if we can move to one side of the chamber. On one side. So we can ask the operators or the representative who can speak on their quarry to come into the chamber so we can ask or have the members uh, give the members opportunities to ask questions. And also you have the opportunity to make some clarifications in regards to Senate Bill 22-52. We'll have at least a 3-minute recess so that we can reset the chamber. Our committee meeting. And now I will open up the floor for the members to ask questions or any clarifications from the quarry operators or the representatives of, or the representative or the secretary of DPL, Senator Leon Guerrero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to open up this Q&A initially with the responsible department within the government that regulates and permits the quarry operators within the Commonwealth. So addressing to DPL Secretary Sixty Ogisomar, I'm sure his assistant can also help. I believe Mr. Guerrero has been a long-time employee of DPL himself. Inventory-wise, what is the total count of dormant quarries within the Commonwealth, specifically for every island? I'm very interested in that number. And then I'll follow up with a secondary question after you provide the numbers.
Thank you, Senator. I believe Saipan we have 2 and about 1 each for Tinian and Nora.
Thank you. And on the number of years that those particular quarries have been dormant, is there a time frame, if you have it off the top of your head right now, if you could tell us how long have they been dormant for each island? And is there any plan to open up for operations similar to what USA plan to have gone through, considering that kind of Tapla area was quarried before, and then subsequently you were permitted back in 2013, I believe those were my notes taken here. Yeah, so specifically I'd like for the question to be answered by DPL.
Thank you, Senator. My name is Gregory Guerrero from the Compliance Department, Division of the Department of Compliance.
Can you speak a little bit louder, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
The for Saipan, there's one in Capitol Hill and the other one is in Keg. I believe it's over about 15 years already since it was built.
Now, the one in Capitol Hill, I'm not too sure where exactly is the location. Are you talking about on that turn up in Capitol Hill, right on the left side as you're going up the hill before you hit Deloitte and Touche location? Or where exactly in Capitol Hill are you talking about? Where is that quarry at and being dormant for 15 years?
It's called Idemi. That's right next to the former Secretary of Pedro A. Tinoyo's property to that part of the area.
Okay. And Kegman?
Kegman is right behind the Saipan Auto golf course. It used to be the municipality of Saipan used to use that as a quarry premises.
If I may ask, Mr. Chairman, that DPO provide us a direct, locations of these dormant quarries, just so that we know exactly where they are located on Saipan. I mean, you won't expect me to go driving around with the dishes just to try to find something, right? So I would appreciate some direct locations. I think the committee would appreciate that. Moving forward, I'm gonna leave it at this and probably come back with more questions. You mentioned, Secretary Ogisomar, that there is a 5% BGR on for the extracted materials, correct? That is being charged for every operator. I believe with the exception of the private operator, I'm not too sure if they're also paying for that.
Senator, I believe what I said was 5% of the annual rental cost, which is $12,000.
Yes.
$12,000 first year and every year thereafter, compounding at 5% per year, up to 5 years. The BGR is not at 5%.
Okay, so then we move on on your comment here. It says permittee shall pay a royalty fee of at least $3 per cubic yard of limestone materials extracted plus 0.5% of BGR.
Yes.
0.5% of BGR?
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you. I yield for now.
Any other member? Senator Sablan?
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome to everyone that's present here in the chamber. Of course, the operators, the quarry operators, and the Department of Public Lands. I have a question for DPL on your comments under the DPL Temporary Occupancy Agreement, the TOA. It was stated that the permittee shall submit a coastal resource to the CRM and DPL a geotechnical investigation report, topographical survey, and quarry operation and reclamation plan. So, are there any current plans that have been submitted, or is this was this regulation implemented pre-quarrying to the quarry operators, or is this something that is this regulation for quarries that will be moving forward or new leases for quarry? So the question is just to ask, are there any plans right now in the books at DPL as the reclamation plan or QORP is stated in the comments?
Yes, Senator. CMS has submitted those reclamation plans of their professional consultant.
So just one out of the
Yes.
quarry operators have submitted.
Yes.
And is this required right now under the regulation? It's required for everybody to submit
Under the agreement.
under the agreement.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to ask that maybe that would be good information to be provided also to the committee so that it could be attached to the legislation. Thank you. I have another question for Mrs. Danko. During your comment, you did mention that post-quarry materials or the post-quarries themselves, maybe of economic advantage. You did say that you can share some of the cases in the U.S. or examples of how these quarries were used as an economic tool in your jurisdiction.
Okay, yes, I would like to thank you for bringing that up. So in the past couple of years, I've been working with CMS. It's taken us maybe 3 years to get a permit renewal. That's how long it's taken us. We have been working really closely with DPL and CRM as their lease agreement is being renewed. We also are trying to work together with CRM to allow us to continue operation. But one of the biggest challenge that we have, or I have encountered, is developing the reclamation plan. Like I said, the lease agreement between DPL and CMS will expire in 2023. How do we, realistically put a reclamation plan with that type of situation when we are not sure whether we will even be granted extension of the lease to continue operations and make sure that it basically the plan that CMS has submitted is fully met, right? For example, let's just throw out a number, 1 million cubic yards. We are still on the very, very small volume of the capacity of that quarry has. So my question is, where do we start? How do we get to that point? First of all, you cannot contaminate the production of the materials during quarry operations. So that's number one that we'd like to have an open discussion on, where I think, the operators are more than willing to cooperate with DPL and work on a plan that makes sense for both the operator and for DPL. I wholeheartedly believe that safety is the number one priority, and I do believe that CMS has been prudent and diligent in their operation. And So what I've done is I've tried to do some research on, what is a reclamation plan? What does that involve? And I've shared with CMS and I believe maybe some senators that I've shared this with because as a public citizen, I feel that not only is it an eyesore, to our tourists and the people of the CNMI, but there's also environmental, some environmental areas there that can be, we've taken out, we've impacted the area during quarry operation. And so I think maybe that restoring it back to its natural environment could be an option. And, we're always talking about the economy, and because this committee, is priorities are economic development, and I think we should look at that, as a whole, as in the Senate, legislature, government agencies, how to best utilize these sites. It might not be in the next 5-10 years, but maybe some of the depleted quarries that are, if they are depleted, we're not sure. I don't know regarding the other quarries, but could be a potential site. We have some developers that have come in here who have, amazing ideas and projects to help in the tourism, especially. But unfortunately, some of the lands that are surrounding has critical wildlife, critical habitat, which will trigger federal regulations. And so we don't want to have that. But in the case where you have a depleted quarry, you pretty much, anything you do to enhance it, I feel would be non-threatening. If you were to put a zip line, for example, a cable car, for example, those are just some of the ideas. But yes, I went around and I started doing some research. I don't have permission to use this case study, but I'd like to share it with you guys, and hopefully this will stimulate the discussion around reusing some of the depleted quarries. One of the things that the CNMI has an issue with drainage, for example, okay? Can some of these quarries be used for stormwater retention, or disposal of treated effluent? I'm not saying, just sewage going into, but, treated effluent instead of dumping it into the lagoon, our precious resource. So, those are conversations and things that we can look at with regulatory agencies like EPA. Are these being done in other countries and other places? There's some studies on turning depleted quarries into botanical gardens, bringing back the wildlife that maybe are endangered in the CNMI. Some of the floral fauna, we're losing the medicinal plants in the CNMI. We're losing all of this because there's so much development. So maybe, bringing them back to these areas, that can be something. We have some elderlies that are unable to continue their, medicinal therapy because we do land clearing. I don't think that it should prevent any land clearing, but I think mitigation could be, okay, we're land clearing, and what type of species or medicinal plants or herbs are there, we can have them replanted in a designated location. So something like that. And some places have very ambitious projects, for example, resorts. So we can look at that, and just, we pass by Canatabla all the time, and some of the vision that, if you can imagine, maybe a cable car with a lookout and some tourist attraction, garden, a lake, we do have a ponding basin there. But like I said, again, that's going to take maybe 20, 30, 40 years down the road. But yeah, those are just some of the things I like to share. And if anybody's interested, I'll be more than happy to assist.
Thank you, Mrs. Danico. And I know you said the challenge is to try to decide what should be included in the reclamation plan, right? Because when the reclamation plan is going to come into play, it is at the point where the quarry is depleted and can no longer be quarried. So at that exact point, the operator would I assume would be exiting, and for them to create a plan, I think there should be more players in. I'd say maybe the plan should be just to bring it back into development ready, or as much as possible, bringing it back to where safety concerns are taken care of, and then the next leasee to build a park or whatever could just get the ball rolling and go right through. I wanted to ask, there's right now we see a lot of federal funds coming in through CDBG, DR, and just ARPA and all that stuff. I wanted to ask, and any of the operators could answer, how is the demand with quarrying and in relation to the two or the four dormant quarries that was asked by Senator De Leon Guerrero? Are those quarries depleted or were they just vacated? But first, in general, to the quarry operators, how is the demand right now? Do we have enough? Are you seeing a shortage of material being quarried, or are there a lot of projects coming in that are kind of using up the quarry materials more so than let's just say the past 5 years?
Good morning, sir. The daily activities for any given day for CMS, we'll just say CMS, is about minimal about 200 CY a day. That's from ready mixed cement to rocks aggregate. So that's our minimal. It's about 200. So with awaiting the anticipation, right now FEMA is ongoing with Hawaiian Rock, right? And then there's other activities that we're waiting for the housing authority to release their funds. So we know that Saipan will, for economic wise, it's building, and we CMS, will ensure that the economy, the materials are there when as needed. But the daily operation is about 200. So that's pretty good for a little company.
That's right. And I asked the question just to make sure that there's enough, material for these projects that are going to come up, and there's going to be a significant amount of projects, that from all both residential and commercial. So I just wanted to kind of get a feel on the actual demand of product and material from the quarries, and to ensure that we have enough to complete these projects that are mandated by by the funds that we're receiving from the federal government. Since they are time sensitive, we have certain years to use these monies, and want to make sure that those factors are covered, that we have enough. So I just wanted to ask that general question. But Mr. Chairman, I'll yield for now, and yield my time to the other members for their questions. But thank you to the operators and to the DPL for being here with us today.
Any other members, first round, questioning or asking for clarifications? These people are very busy. Well, they're here. Let's ask them the questions and any comments that they would like to put up for them. Senator Carl.
No, Chairman, the Senator didn't get asked that.
Okay. Senator Leon, Senator Carl is giving you his time at this time.
Thank you, Senator Neighbors, for giving your time to me. I appreciate the comment from Hawaiian Rock, Mr. Bush. I really appreciate about safety and signage. Definitely, nobody wants to be caught at the vertical, cliff. I often wonder about the enforcement of, for example, the dormant quarries. I would think that DPL, that would be in your area of responsibility, knowing that there's no operators in those dormant quarries, right? And we have a lot of young adults that are out there trekking in the entire island of Saipan, Roa, and Tinian, and it always crosses my mind about, are we putting up the required fencing in those properties to alert our community members that there is a risk as you approach the area, and whether those signages are up to warn the community that there is danger in the area? Whose responsibility is that? Additionally, I've driven kind of Topla Road because, as a family, we have a private property way up on the mountain. So, and I grew up in the area myself. I was just telling the story to Senator Vinnie that I'll never forget the moment when I was a little girl riding in the back of a pickup truck, and the trucks, slipped back because the ground was very slippery. And thank goodness for the tangan trees that blocked the bed of the truck, and we didn't fall off the cliff. I'll never forget that moment in my life. And as we speak today, I drove up to Kanatapla just recently, and I saw the fencing, which is tin roofing with stakes. And I'm wondering, is that the acceptable kind of fencing for safety? I believe it's further out on the area maybe of the quarry operation that's not being operated or being mined, or I don't know whether that fencing has changed. I'm just wondering because I did see that a while back, and I'm wondering if that is the standard of fencing that we are acceptable as a permitting and regulatory agency and department, just for purposes of community safety, and for especially the residents that are living in the area, and for any other area on site, and for that matter. Can you please provide some clarification on that?
Yes, sir. We do have fencing provisions on all of our agreements on the kind of top left. First of all, the fencing is a 6-foot chain link fence. We're posting a danger of signs in 25 feet. For the kind of top left, I believe we allowed, instead of a chain link, a barbed wire fence, both quarry premises on those areas. However, the dormant public land quarries, I don't recall if there's any fencing or signs posing risk to whoever is within those areas.
Do you have any plans on doing something about that? Considering that we're not too sure as we speak today if there's any fencing, because I can go back during my time as a Secretary of Labor, going around with the MSHA federal officials, touring the quarries on Saipan, Tinian, Rota, and Saipan caught my attention as I drove up towards the north side, and there was no fencing at all. And I'm wondering now, fast forward today, here me sitting asking the question again, is there any fencing today as we speak to, again, warn our community that there is hazard in the area, that there's this huge hole in the ground, and God forbid that any of our kids that love to go out and release something fall into the cliff line, and we just don't know. And considering that communications is also limited in the northern side of Saipan, right? Connectivity to family members is quite limited. So I am worried. And where does DPO come into play with that?
For clarification. For clarification, when you say the north side, which particular area is it? Capitol Hill?
No, towards La Fiesta, and you take that road up, I believe. Yeah, deep into that.
Okay,
Yeah, I've driven there.
Yes.
Yes, and there's no fencing in that area. I believe there's 1 or 2 quarries maybe, or maybe one that's dormant, and it's a huge pit.
Yes. I'm not mistaken, we did a recent inspection on those areas, and we're gonna be notifying the permitting, you know, not just the fencing, but all other conditions of permits as well.
So may I?
Secretary, Senator. Thank you very much for bringing those things up. We will have these discussions in our public lands to make sure we're able to put all these risk evaluation on public lands. Just yesterday, I was talking to our accounting director. The issues that public land will be facing on any of these lands is the financial capacity and capability and ability to be able to take care of these things. We understand that we have public lands and it's under the jurisdiction of DPL. However, if DPL is really going to look into inventory management of the entire properties, it's going to cost a lot of money. For example, we do have funding for risk management of Managaha, but any and all other real estates that are under lease with DPL, there is no direct funding for management of those things because the funding of DPL is limited by the revenue projection annually. Therefore, that revenue projection, personnel sucks up most of that, plus A&E projects and all others. So that is a discussion that we had yesterday, and we'll take into serious consideration of your comments to make sure that we do have as much as we can to make us at least be responsible per se to have those signages up. One, to make sure that every operator is following the terms and conditions of the lease agreements. And then for those that are not occupied currently or vacated, that we find a way to see how we can put up some signs. As far as fencing them, that would be a serious financial issue with me for us to be able to find funding to fence up, depending on how big it is. But thank you. We will make sure we put that in our action plans for the quarries that are dormant or vacated or not attended. Just must.
And thank you. My last question to any of the operators, if you can share with the committee, when was the last time that you had any engagement with MSHA at your facilities? Anybody? I'm just curious to know.
MSHA requires. MSHA. Okay, sorry. MSHA requires that on all exposed faces that you have a berm at least half the wheel height of the largest piece of equipment. So if you have a loader or wheels this high, the berm would have to be this high along all exposed faces of the quarry. Now your travel ways, your roadways are open, but if it's very off the side, then you have a berm on the side of your travel. So if everything is done properly, there are no exposed faces open to equipment, pickup trucks and that sort of thing. Now, of course, someone can walk over that berm, and then, as I said, if there's an exposed face or there's no signage, warning of a cliff face or anything like that, then someone may not be aware. But in terms of vehicle traffic, if MSHA is being truly followed, there should be no exposed faces for someone to just run off the road and into a quarry.
Just to add on to that, I know that in West Virginia, before the trucks hit the highways, that those wheels are washed. And, I noticed that here it just makes me wonder, just because we live on an island doesn't mean that we have to drop our standards. And I often wonder about that when you're following huge trucks, coverage, right, on the truck, make sure that those covers are on and then those rocks are not flying off, and maybe somebody's windshield will be blown out, or maybe a huge rock is stuck in those giant wheels. You never know, as they're spinning on the road, that those big rocks may just blow back at you and rupture your entire windshield. So safety is absolutely a concern. Besides, we're talking about reclamation, but the overall perspective of the operation of the industry, I believe that all of us have a vested interest because all of us live on this island, all three islands in the Commonwealth. And I would really appreciate that, again, collaboratively and working in partnership with the legislature and the cognizant department, DPL, and then also the private sector operators that we all, bring together our care for the community and not just with the conversation this morning on reclamation, but the overall operation of the industry itself. Thank you very much. I really appreciate your time today.
I now recognize the Vice Chairman, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank you to everyone that are here for this committee meeting. My first question will be directed to DPO with respect to the dormant quarry, the two dormant quarry that have been lapsed for the past 15 years. Is it, does it meet already the depths that's required from CRM not to extract, and that is why the quarry remain closed, or no company is interested to come in and engage the continuity of this quarry operation?
Thank you, Senator. Yes, both quarries have a huge bid. But I'm not sure if CRF has seized that area to further quarry.
So in the absence of knowledge in the permitting agency, that quarry will remain dormant. And that is why we're talking here, how to ensure the safety. This bill is addressed about safety and reclamation for future usage of or benefit of the resident or any business in itself. So if that quarry remains unattended or without further investigation as to why, no one is interested to continue to extract materials after 15 years of being dormant, then something must have gone unattended. And that's why I'm asking whether DPL and the CRM have met or have already depleted the minimum excavation so that there will be no further digging further down. And if there's a quarry here that's been operating for the past 30 years and continue to operate, so what is this quarry that is dormant for the past 15 years that remains sleeping? Is it we harvest the maximum material already that will not permit any investor or an interested company to further extract raw material from this particular quarry?
First, Senator, I'm not sure whether there's any communication between DPO and CRM about the depletion of the quarry, whether it can be quarried again or not. It probably there was, but I wasn't involved. That I wouldn't know, and I would know.
Okay, so if I may ask, is there any other company interested that have aired their interest for quarry operation again in Saipan?
No. No, Senator.
No, I appreciate the operator from this, and what this legislation deal is, maybe we can definitely, as I understand that no one really object this legislation other than to provide more incentive to ensure that we work together, DPL and the operators as well as CRM. But I would recommend Secretary Uguizamar. I just heard that at times applicants or renewing their lease really absorb a lot of days or months before they can even get their renewal. And if parties involved, maybe it'll be a good policy for DPL to really invite collectively this department that consent the quarry operator to move forward, especially in making the decision for renewal. Now, I understand the concern of all these quarry operators that are using public land, that probably it's not fair for this legislation to require them, for the reclamation. But we would like to understand also and perhaps give the committee some bright ideas how we can come together to ensure the proposed intent of this legislation. Perhaps I would ask the committee to probably provide a waiver for all these quarry operator doing business and allow this legislation to take effect on all these new regulations if a new quarry is open. And I believe the DPL would have the first hand to find out from this operator occupying public land, what is their expiration date of their lease, so that we can ensure some section that prior to the expiration, if no interest is expressed for continuity, that we set some standard of what reclamation activity should be done by these operators. And that way, we will not require them to do the reclamation beginning the successful of this legislation moving forward. And as for private operator, I don't know how can this legislation participate in enforcing the private, private property. Is there any idea, Secretary, that you can provide with the committee?
Thank you very much, Senator. I was trying to write down things that I can make coming on as you ended. But for me, I just wanted to just clarify what I generally understand about public land, and based on all the regulations, it's really in a risk-averse situation where it has no business, based on my discussions with attorneys and directors. No business is any form of trying to take up any form of risk. So in essence, a lot of things that are happening in public lands are very, I would say, status quo, not necessarily engaging in any motivation to try and be proactive in anything else. And I'm saying that in a good way, not to say that there's things wrong. It's just the way DPL is being set up. And so with respect to the quarry, my question would be to help this bill or to assist, the recommendation would be, as we are seeing now, is a clarification on this bill on every entity, organization, government that deals with quarry, to list them down in this bill and tell them what they need to do and should do and how they should collaborate. Because generally for me, for public land, we have a land, who wants to quarry it, and it ends there. We give you a permit to go in based on what we learn from these other organizations, and here's an agreement. Any other permit for you to operate that, I don't know, do you go to labor and get your mining certifications? Do you go CRM for your major siting permits? Do you go to Fish and Wildlife? We do have mining operators, quarry that we've given a license to for the last 2 years ago, but they haven't started. But in my regulations, it states as soon as I give you an agreement, you owe me $12,000 a year. And every year they've been paying me, but they haven't started. And they're saying, can you waive me on that? Because I haven't started. But according to the regulations, it says, I'm sorry, when I give you the permit to occupy it, you pay it. And the reason why they haven't started is they have to go through all these other processes that I don't know of. But I'm familiar that CRM is one of them. And there's these birds and chickens running around this quarry that he cannot do anything. He cannot make a noise, cannot do. But why is the quarry there in the first place? So I think for me, I'm thinking that this is a very good discussion and a very good bill, but you might want to direct us. For DPO, I give lease for public land. Make sure that there is safety on this to the person who's occupying it, and make sure I have plans in case it's vacated. Because those things are almost not there as a direction, right? And then who gives this mining quarrying? Is it laborers, federal, whatever? Are those what do they follow? The tires, cars that are, trucks that are leaving. You're very right, Senator. When you're leaving, and all these dust are all over the neighborhood, is it coming from the top of the truck or it's coming from the tires? All this dust. So I too, as a citizen, yeah, it'd be nice to have all those. But with respect to public land, the only thing that we really stated, I forgot to mention in my opening, is we really have no manpower to do an overall enforcement on quarries. We have the manpower to create an agreement for somebody to enter and have the permit. But any other enforcement on whether you follow the regulations or not, that's out of our jurisdiction. Unless they violate, CRM will come to us, then we end up engaging with the quarry operator, whether they violated the conditions that we have, that you must do this, you must follow this. So all those other stuff, I think if this bill can be a comprehensive bill where it puts some kind of organization or body to oversee the quarry operators, and DPO is only the one that gives an authorization and a permit to a quarry operator to operate. What can you do? For example, as far as, I'll give you one good example, and I know I'm talkative, right? And I say all these things, and the lawyer will shut me down in court and say you talk too much, right? But for example, why am I responsible on what the quarrier is going to do in the quarry? If his license is quarry operation, then he does whatever quarry operation is. But then I have to dictate now, oh, you can only grade the rock. As far as batching it, you cannot until I give you permit. I'm just thinking some of those things are common sense issues that they're facing that I think makes sense for us to discuss and figure out who should make that decision, right? It's a business operation issue. If I give them a permit to sell espresso, right? Now I'm about to tell them, make sure it's latte only or Americano only, because that's what's happening. And so it's burdening me because then now I have to, right? So now on the private, I'm not sure where, and I'm sure I can agree to the private company, but if he's next to my public land quarry and he's here or they're here, and I have all these stringent, but they're blowing everything up on the other side, then who's managing them? So I don't know. I don't know where because I have an issue on Tinian where I have operators on Tinian Quarry that are public, trying to get public, and I have a private operator here who's just operating and loosely, maybe freely, right? Because it's private land. So same thing with Hawaiian Rock, they're on private land. Maybe it's labor that's monitoring them, not me. So I'm just asking Senator Cook, as per your recommendation, that maybe tell us how you would like us to cooperate together. And DPO's position is if I can afford to do it or not with respect to available funding.
And thank you, Senator Sixto. I know it's not your responsibility to ensure the follow-up of all permitting, no. But I'm asking that maybe in good faith for investors, that things like this must collaboratively work with other agencies that will impact the beginning of this operation. So if I am there just to, like what you mentioned, to apply for public land for quarry, and you want only my dollars, and the agency, will disregard the other permitting that can seal the operation process, then I don't think that's really in good faith that we collect money and we do not allow the investors to move forward. So I'm just saying this to see if one entity can work collaboratively proactively with the other agencies that needs to ensure the business operation to move forward. But
Senate President, I totally agree with you, and I apologize. My statement that I just mentioned earlier is what I saw and encountered at DPL. Coming from this body as a former senator and understanding how executive department should operate proactively is what we're trying to do now at DPL. There was a permit for a quarry on Rhoda that took longer than normal. And the reason why, but we've issued it already. The reason why it took longer than normal is I had to do the best data evaluation in my office. That application sat in my desk because I was collecting data on what the quarry numbers are like in the CNMI, how much is everybody paying, to make sure that the ratings that we're doing are not just arbitrary numbers. So I was trying my best to proactively review the application to make sure the investor is not being overcharged and to make sure that we are doing it properly. So I agree with you that I will and engage in investors, operators, and other regulatory agencies to make this work. I'm just airing what is historically with DPL, and that if I leave DPL tomorrow, the next secretary may just follow that same format again. So I'm asking that DPL can help us out to make sure we engage.
thank you, Senator. I would you, Mr. Chairman, after I make this known to the secretary that the committee have full faith in you to navigate the direction of DPL and to ensure other agency to work together, most especially during this time that like we are sleeping now in all the opportunities for our tourist growth. But as soon as this pandemic is out, I understand that the demand for development will be most seen in the future. So if we are all concerned, to have a friendly environment, safety, and economic growth, then we need to come together to help these people that contributed the growth and opportunity for both for the island and our people. So collectively, government agencies supposedly to come together and help investment make it easier. Today, all we hear is they love to come to Saipan or to the CNMI to invest, but it's so hard to move forward with whatever investment because of all this permitting agency taking so long. But if one agency, whether it's your responsibility or not, and you are part of the economic process, then I guess it is only good that we excel to invite other agencies to move the direction of moving our economy forward and benefiting the people that need this kind of services. Like Kamek mentioned, Rhoda, the road have been delayed for so long, maybe 2 years already, because there's no quarry, there's no aggregate, and they had to go outside the CNMI to probably procure some aggregate and other raw materials for to do the project in Rhoda. And by virtue of taking too long in making this decision to permit to give permission for applicant to do us this service, it's not only burdening the benefit of the community, but it really burdens the contractor itself. So again, thank you, and I am very confident that with your leadership at DPL, you can really ease all this unnecessary delay with your efforts to collaboratively work with other agencies. And maybe someday all these 5% royalty will just have to be directed to DPL for its operation to ensure that manpower is available to move forward. Thank you. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
May I now recognize Mr. Moon?
I just wanted to, with respect to the vice chairman's comments, Vice Chairman Holcomb, what was brought up today, that there's been an identification of inactive quarry sites. And this may present an opportunity to, with respect to the reclamation process that Senator Sablan had mentioned earlier. We have quarries already in operation. We have a site that's inactive that, a study can be made as to the condition of the turnover of this particular site per se, as is, where it is, and bring light to how these operations that are currently active should upon arriving at full depletion, whatever that time is, how that land should be turned over. And this inactive site could be made as a study for which it can be reviewed as to its existing condition and whether that's an acceptable condition for turnover. And at the same time, make available for on an RFP for an opportunity for development, as Sonia said earlier today, and some of her ideas with respect to commercial development, botanical garden, maybe a park. We do have a template with respect to the park that was previously the landfill that was there in Puerto Rico, now a park. Can the same situation be done with a quarry? And so just dealing with one of these active sites, if a study reveals that it's been fully depleted, then we know that there's really no other further use for quarry. And with respect to the condition of the site, if its state is acceptable, then we have a standard for which current quarries will have to turn over its property once it's fully depleted. And if we offer it out as an RFP for development, then we gauge interest and eventually allow for some result with respect to what we can do with our quarries for the future. So I think it allows us to really answer a lot of questions in real time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Senator Sablan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have one more. I was kind of looking into some quarry informations, in particular in the CNMI, and I stumbled across an article on the Tribune back in 2016 of May, and the title of the article was "Federal Takeover of Mining Quarry Regs Alarming." In this article, several of the operators that are with us this morning were mentioned, and this was at the time where I guess MSHA came in to implement the regulations. And of course, we all know that operating in the CNMI in this geographic location, there's some unique factors and challenges. And I see I feel the side of the operators. Whatever came out about that, it was mentioned in the article that MSHA sponsored a training. Did any of the operators attend that? And does MSHA currently, do they actively regulate their quarries right now? I mean, have they been on the ground recently? Or I know the quarries were asking for ample time for these regulations to be implemented. 5 years was asked, according to the article, to implement MSHA regulations and policies. I'm just curious to ask whatever happened to this um, to this matter, after the 2016 training, was there really a training that took place, or any of the operators can answer that? Okay, so, yeah, okay, so, but, where you remember, right, in 2016, the article, Federal Takeover of Mining, quarry regs, which is alarming, right? And then, of course, our quarry operators sounded off the alarm because MSHA wanted to come in and just implement these very, these regulations that maybe does not apply to here in the CNMI, right? Or they're very complex and or so. I'm just wondering if there was any closure to this, or was a timeline given to our operators, and is MSHA actively regulating now? Just for us to kind of gauge, especially now that we're gonna start, looking into the legislation from Senator Guillaume Guerrero to, strengthen the regulations locally.
Yes, Senator, I can try to answer some of your question. So pertaining to MSHA back then, yes, there was a course. CMS was part of this, and out of that, there's a lot of stringent stuff that we do have to follow, i.e. one of them is time cards. It's a totally different system. So whatever is happening there, they need to see what's going on. So we replicate again, like i.e. time cards, what's going on, safeties. And then they just had a course just a month and a half ago, again pertaining to from Department of Labor for MSHA, and MSHA's regulation has changed tremendously. And that's from my superintendent that informed me that the rules back then and now is more stringent. So we do follow the guidelines as posted, and we don't see any problem. We just follow the rules.
Okay, thank you. I just asked that because we want to make sure that we consider, those factors and the implementation of the regulations, or maybe regulations that are not fit to the CNMI and its operations, or unique operations for quarrying. So I was just interested in what took place during that training, and was there any was there any agreement or timeline on when and what regulations were to be implemented here in the CNMI?
Speaking for Wire Rock Brothers. Sorry, speaking for Wire Rock Brothers. We follow an umbrella of companies that operate in Nevada and California, as well as Guam and here in Tinian. We follow the MSHA standards because the rest of the companies within the umbrella do. Now, is it cost effective? Not really. It has a lot of costs. We had a full-time safety officer. We brought out people from California to help us implement. We brought people from Guam to help us implement. And we spend a lot of money to follow those regulations. Is it easy to do? No. On this island, it's very difficult to do. But it can be done. But you have to put money into it. And unfortunately, when you put money into it, then it affects your bottom line, and it affects your costs. And we have to manage that part of it. But again, within Hawaiian Rock, we have no choice but to follow those regulations. And we believe everybody should be able to follow those regulations, because otherwise, other people have a competitive advantage just because they're not following the law or following the MSHA standards, which are supposed to be taken effect here. So, to us, using the excuse of, well, we're a small island, we shouldn't have to follow it, that doesn't follow our philosophy.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that that there's fair regulations. An example of this is during the storms. This is away from quarry, but it's an example that we can we can compare after Sodelor and U2, FEMA asked us to implement the International Building Code of 2018, where we were in, I think, 2013. But we dove into the regulations, and former Senator Sixto was the author of that legislation, and there was a lot. They just said, in order for FEMA to provide funding for to rebuild the devastation of Typhoon Sodelor and Typhoon U2, we want the CNMI to implement the International Building Code of 2018 in general. And when we dove into the clauses of the IBC 2018, there were so many things there that wasn't really applicable to the CNMI, like tornadoes and all that stuff. So we had to go in and change those things and make sure that, okay, we will adopt and abide by the IBC 2018, but we want to make sure that it's fair to us and it's fair to the contractors here that build, and make sure that all of the aspects of the regulation that doesn't apply here is removed. So that's where I was kind of aiming at, is that we want to make sure that MSHA is not requiring something that does not really apply to the quarry operators, just to be fair. So we want to make sure that we're a tool to bridge that gap, and to make sure that the regulations that are brought upon the operators and yourselves are fair, and so that there's no stringent or unnecessary regulations that are placed upon you and just really does not apply. I mean, we went through it with the IBC, the International Building Code. We had to remove so many of those things, that made them understand, made FEMA understand that, okay, we'll implement the ones that we feel that would strengthen our structure, our homes and structures, but you gotta make sure that you don't implement anything and fine us for not abiding by the general language of the code in itself. So I just want to make sure that we can help in that manner, and that was where my question was.
I'm glad you brought up that point, because it does raise another question with respect to operating, quarries. In the CNMI, I believe DPL, CRM, the definition of quarrying can mean different things. Can mean harvesting and selling, or transporting that harvested material for production, or it can mean harvesting and manufacturing. So I would like to suggest that some research be done on what MSHA does regulate and do not regulate as far as operation of sites. And I would like to ask DPL if there is a distinction between operations of harvesting versus operations that would fall under MSHA. For example, you have one site that could be just for harvesting, no manufacturing, and then you have another site that has. Is there a distinction at DPL, or is it just classified as quarrying, and then it's up to the operator to do their due diligence to see whether it does require MSHA or it does not require MSHA?
Thank you. As I stated earlier in my opening remarks, DPO's regulation is very simple. A letter I defining a quarry, which is a very general definition of a place of excavation or digging, including mining. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we give you the permit to do the quarry based on the negotiations and our agreement. Any other permits, you will have to do it on your own through CRM, or as you mentioned, I don't know, is that the MSHA at labor, whether MSHA gives off certification of permits to the operators. I don't know that part. I'm only currently aware of what's in our current regulations, an agreement sample controls amongst all operators, which is DPL and CRM, where MSHA falls in that. No. Thank you.
Under MSHA, you can quite easily find what's required for quarrying and the mining operation, what's required in the crushing operations. There's distinctions there. Now, when I say it's easy to find that stuff. It's not easy to implement. That's the problem. It does take a lot of effort. And we spend a lot of hours to maintain the MSHA stuff. Now, the federal government hasn't been out there to enforce it. Who knows when they'll come out? And there's no local enforcement of MSHA. So if you want to talk about the transportation side on the trucks, that's motor carrier, Department of Transportation, however you want to put it. But in terms of covers on the trucks, that has nothing to do with MSHA. There's regulations here that cover that. And again, the motor safe carrier group that stops trucks and stuff, I'm guessing that they check to see if there's covers. And then the police department and other enforcement agencies should be checking to make sure that the loads are covered when they're going down the road. But that has nothing to do with MSHA. MSHA has only to do with the mining operations, the crushing operations, and those on a quarry site.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other member? Before I close, time for comments. Since there are no more questions or comments from the members, Secretary DPL and your staff and the operators and your staff, we thank you very much for coming in this morning so that we can discuss more on how we can proceed in improving this legislation so that the operators also have a say-so in terms of the development of this legislation. Because you are the ones that are going to implement the legislation once it becomes law. And of course, the committee will collect more information like the MSHA. There's one quarry operator that mentioned about the MSHA that it's required of quarries. So we'll try to get the information on that. So this legislation will not duplicate what is already being administered by the federal government, which is the Mine Safety and Health Administration, which they call MSHA. And if there's any other information that the quarry operators would like to share with the committee, please forward to us, so we can you can join us in improve the legislation for the betterment of not only U.S. operators but the community at large. Before I close, going back to the Gorman quarry here in Capitolio, what I know about that quarry, one of the reasons, if it's true, that they closed that because of the danger. There are houses around it, and there are rocks falling off because it's close to the mountain or by the mountain. So there are rocks falling off around that area. So I think that's what forced DPL to close that quarry. At least that's what I heard from the neighbors over there. So with that, we thank you very much. Please submit your comments to us so we can work on this legislation so we can make it better for everyone that are involved. Secretary, hopefully every time we have this discussion on businesses, it's always about permits. One is so fast, one is so slow, and one is just very, very slow. So we're not so sure whether we can put a schedule in the bill For example, like CEDA says there are 90 days you have to do this and that with other agencies, approve or disapprove, period. So we're not so sure whether we're gonna put timelines for all agencies to make sure that they approve such permits. But that's the committee will discuss that with probably with you or Mr. Secretary on the next time that we look at this. But for sure, once this draft is done with your inputs, we will forward it to you so that you can have another look at it before the committee finalizes it and presents the final product to the whole Senate for passage. So once again, thank you very much, and committee members, thank you very much for being your time, and we look forward to improving this legislation. Again, thank you so much. Now, we are going to skip the other bills on the agenda in objection from the members. And with that, may I hear a motion for adjournment? Okay, so there's a motion and have the seconded to adjourn this committee meeting. This committee meeting is hereby adjourned at 10:52. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you guys so much.